I'm a guy, an American, United States Army Infantry. Back in the days when the public school system taught things like U.S. history and civics. Used to. I went to Felta School in Northern California. It's a one-room school, 7 grades, which Mrs. Goddard taught simultaneously. The school is now a state historical monument. Mrs. Goddard should be. She spanked me once. Right in front of the class. I went home and complained to my mother. Spanked me again. One of the things we had to do in Felta School, we had to read the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. And I think a lot of our problem today is that we don't know the Constitution. You ought to read it. Pretty interesting stuff in there. Some of it's pretty scary. Anyway, we had to recite from memory parts of the Constitution. I had to recite in front of the whole class the preamble. You know, we the people, blessings of liberty, provide for the common defense, and so on. It wasn't that much, and I was actually only in the 2nd grade. We learned about the House of Representatives and we learned about the census. Ever wonder why we count everybody in America every 10 years?
Yeah. Yes.
Not just grown-ups, men, women, children, not just Americans, foreigners, legal, illegal. We count everyone because the Constitution says so, for the sole purpose of deciding how many representatives each state will get in the House of Representatives in the Congress of the United States. That's why the census. I want to give you a little history, and then I'm going to tell you what you do to change Congress. In the first House of Representatives in 1789, there were 30,000 people represented by each congressman. Get that? Everyone represented 30,000 people. Today, a congressman or woman represents nearly 800,000 people. Is there any reason there why they don't pay any attention to you? 800,000 people? What do they care? You see, in that first house with 30,000 people, if half of them were voters, it only took 7,500 people plus one to throw a guy out. It's trickier today, but it can still be done. And I don't want to bore you with the math, but I'm going to go through some math quickly in a minute. There are 435 of these people now, 435 congressmen or women. Who are those people?
They love you.
435 people representing about 700,000 people each. And again, I just want to give you a little background. Why 435? That isn't in the Constitution. It's a number Congress made up way back in 1912 to make sure that regardless how big the population got, they'd only have this nice little club of 435 people, and the bigger the population got, the less representation each of us would get. These days, 79% of congressmen are re-elected, sometimes with no opposition. All of these guys, or most of these guys, will tell you that when we're talking about pork, and that's why we're here, and spending money that we don't have, they say they have to in order to be re-elected. I want to tell you about a guy in Arizona, a congressman with the unfortunate name of Jeff Flake. He's anything but a flake. Jeff ran, he represents northeastern Arizona. He ran on the platform of no pork at any time. He wasn't going to bring a nickel back to Arizona. He's been re-elected 3 times. So how do we stop the spending, stop the pork, stop the arrogance? Stop the spenders. And while districts may vary, the numbers are going to stay about right. So what I'm saying is this is close enough for government work. 680,000 people in a congressional district. It's men, women, and children. Legals, illegals, tall, short, fat. 60% are usually eligible to vote. That's 40%. That's 400,000. Only half of them will register. Now we're down to 200,000. And only half of the ones who register will vote. Now we're down to a theoretical 100,000. If there's 100,000 voters, now you only need 50,000 plus 1 to win. If you have an election committee, you want to replace a congressman, suppose you get 200 people together, or about 1/4 of what's here. And you have them go out door to door. Each one needs to locate and convince 500 people to vote and vote your way. It's not hard, because most of those, 40% of those 500 are going to be with you anyway, before you even talk to them. Now you've got half of them, you need one more vote. Call me, I'll go find them. Now this sounds oversimplified, I know, but I've seen it work. Probably the most famous one is a guy named George Nethercutt. You ever heard of George Nethercutt? George Nethercutt ran for the Congress from the state of Washington against the Speaker of the House, Tom Foley. Kicked his butt. And this is how he did it. Door to door, knocking on doors, talking to people, and explaining why there was a better way than Tom Foley. The point is, if we quit letting these guys separate us into left wing and right wing, and conservative and liberal, and we start getting together on what we have in common instead of what we differ in, if we start deciding that we want our representatives to actually represent us, not just let us pay for them to do the president's work, we can do this.
Amen.
There are 300 million of us and 425 of them. How do you like them odds?